This is the Strong is a Mindset podcast, episode number 144. If you're eating healthy, but you're not losing weight, let's talk about why that is and what you can do about it. This is the Strong is a Mindset podcast, where you'll learn how to build both a strong body and a strong mind by eating, moving, and thinking. I'm your host, physician, personal trainer, certified health coach, and certified life coach, Carrie Holland. Hey, how are you? What's new? What's good? So, what's good here? We are going to talk about something that comes up all the time. It comes up for my weight loss clients. It shows up in the Facebook groups I'm part of. I get asked about it frequently. And that question is, what's going on when you're eating healthy, but you're still not losing weight? So this is one of the most common frustrations that I run into with my clients who are trying to lose weight. And maybe you can relate. You may be doing all the things. You're eating healthy. Your meals are made up of lean protein, whole and complex carbs, healthy fats, and loads of veggies. You're making what seems like healthy choices for your snacks instead of reaching for a bag of pretzels and a Dr. Pepper from the vending machine. But despite this, nothing's happening. The scale is not moving. You're not losing weight. And it's frustrating. It feels unfair because you feel like you're doing everything right, but the scale does not budge. And when this happens for weeks or even months, it can make you question everything. It makes you question if you're capable of progress, if you've got the right plan, or if there's something else you need to do in order to move the needle. You may wonder if all of your effort is resulting in wasted energy. And that does not feel good. And I get it. When you put in the work, like planning meals, shopping, prepping, and maybe even exercising regularly, you expect to see results. So when those results don't happen, you may feel discouraged, and it may make you feel like giving up altogether. And that is exactly why we need to talk about this, because my goal is that you do not give up. If you're eating healthy and you're still not losing weight, that tells me that something else is going on. And we need to get sleuthy. We need to start looking for what else is going on that's keeping you stuck and keeping you from losing weight. Because I promise you, if you go looking for it, you will find it, and then you can do something about it. So we've got to find it. We need to find the reasons that you're not losing weight or not making progress, even when you're eating healthy. And there are a number of reasons for this, and we're going to talk through them today. We're going to pull apart the places where you might be getting tripped up so you can get out of your own way and finally start seeing the progress you're looking for. All right, so let's go. So first, let's get clear on what's really going on here, because this is what I will see happen all the time. I'll have a client who, when we first start working together, will explain that she eats mostly healthy at her main meals. She'll start her day with a protein-forward breakfast. She has a balanced lunch that combines lean protein, fiber, and veggies. She may have a planned snack that's centered around protein and fiber. And then her dinner is generally well thought out. But yet, her weight is not moving. So what gives here? What's going on? And what I've realized after coaching many, many clients around this is that it's everything else. Maybe the main meals are fine, but it's what's happening in between or beyond those healthy meals that is likely the problem. So maybe it's the handful of nuts that you grab from the pantry while you're pulling dinner together. Maybe it's finishing the last few bites of chicken fingers off your kid's plate. Maybe it's a little taste that you're having while you're cooking. Or maybe like me, it's a spoonful of peanut butter that you scoop for yourself before you go get ready for bed. And none of those things will feel significant on their own because they're not. But when you add up all of these over the course of a day, it can be just enough to keep you at net zero change and stall your progress. And so this is why it is so important to get really honest with yourself and take a really close look at what you are actually doing. And remember, this is not about being perfect. This is not about never having a treat. Instead, it's about taking a look at the bigger picture and seeing the cumulative effect of all the little things you're doing that are adding up to keeping you stuck. Maybe you're consistently on track Monday through Thursday, and you're having 3 healthy, balanced meals on those days. But then the weekend comes, and Friday through Sunday look completely different than the weekdays. Maybe you're underestimating the caloric density of the foods that you're eating, even if they are in fact healthy. Maybe there are stress, sleep, and other factors that you haven't fully considered. So if you feel like you're doing everything right and the scale is not moving, we need to take a closer look at what's happening outside your main meals. And let me make this clear. The solution is not to be more strict or cut out more foods. No. Instead, the solution is going to be to create more awareness, make small adjustments, and focus on consistency over time. Because it's likely not one big thing keeping you stuck. Most likely, it's a handful of a few small things that need some attention. Okay, so now let's talk about what those small, sneaky little things are. So let's start with alcohol because this is a big one. And from the outset, I will say that I'm not here to tell you not to drink, okay? I promise. But what I do want you to consider is the impact that alcohol is having on your health, fitness, and physique goals. And there is an impact, okay? A few glasses of wine, a second margarita, or a flight of craft beer is enough to make a dent, and it can be enough to keep you exactly where you are. And also remember that beyond the caloric impact that alcohol has, it also lowers your inhibitions around food. So alcohol affects your decision making, and that extra glass of wine will make it much easier for you to say, yes, please pass the bread and olive oil. And so often when you have alcohol, you start snacking more than you planned for. And then maybe that one drink turns into two, and then you find yourself reaching for nuts or chips or dessert that you weren't planning on having. Or maybe you decide to order a bigger, more indulgent dinner because in the moment, it sounds like a good idea. And even from a metabolic standpoint, alcohol will mess with your ability to metabolize food. When you drink, your body prioritizes metabolizing alcohol first over processing food. So I think of alcohol as a distraction to your metabolism. Your body has to deal with it right away, and that's at the expense of dealing with the food that you eat. And your overall metabolism slows as a result, and this could lead to decreased fat metabolism and increased fat storage. And the take home here is that while it may seem like just a few drinks here or there, it may be just enough to keep you from making progress. And the reasons for this are twofold. It could be from the extra calories that you take in with the alcohol itself, or it could be the impact it has on what you eat when you're drinking. So it's what happens after you drink too. So if you drink alcohol and you're not making progress, it is worth paying attention to it. Reducing the frequency of your drinking, or even being more intentional about what you eat before, during, and after drinking can make a huge difference. So another reason you may not be losing weight despite eating healthy is if you graze or if you tend to have unplanned snacks in between your meals. So this is a big one. This comes up frequently and is most definitely going to get in your way of making progress. So it could be a handful of nuts here, a couple of bites of your kids' mac and cheese there, an extra spoonful of peanut butter while you're making a snack. So whatever it is, it probably does not feel like a big deal in the moment. And it really isn't. An extra lick of peanut butter, no big deal, right? It often doesn't even register and you don't think twice about it. But it's the accumulation of all those little things that adds up, and they add up fast. And that's what makes them so sneaky. So you may do this once in the morning and have an extra spoonful of peanut butter. Then you might do it again after lunch when you grab an extra handful of nuts just because it's there. You might have a few chunks of cheese while you're pulling dinner together. Then a few bites of something from your kid's plate. And in the moment, each extra individually really doesn't seem like much. So what if you grab a little something for a total of 4 times in a day? And then you do that every day of the week for 7 days. So that's 28 little extras all over the course of a week. And I would argue that will be more than enough to keep you stalled. That is enough. So the little things like grazing and unplanned snacks really don't seem like much in the moment, but if you zoom out and look at the impact over the course of a week, it can actually add up to quite a bit. And if you're not paying attention to it, if you're not food journaling or keeping track of what you're eating in some way, you're probably not going to make the connection. If you're not tracking or logging those small bites, most often they don't exist in your brain. They don't register, but they most definitely register on your body, okay? Your body still counts all of the extra bites and all of the grazing. So even if those bites are small and mindless and scattered throughout your day, they still matter. They still count. Your metabolism does not hit pause just because those few bites of chocolate chip cookie did not feel substantial to you. It all adds up. And over time, those mindless bites that you're not really thinking about can be the difference between being in maintenance and losing weight. So similar to, but different from, unplanned snacks and grazing is liquid calories. So I put this separately from alcohol because I do think these are just a bit different, and I think it's important to highlight the differences. So let it be known, I have nothing against coffee drinks or sodas, smoothies, protein shakes with all the mix-ins, but all of these have the potential to add up. Your fancy coffee with flavored syrup and whipped cream and chocolate sauce can turn your caffeine hit into a meal without you even realizing it. And smoothies are generally considered healthy. It's just fruit, right? But they can end up being more calorically dense than a meal once you load in nut butters, fruit juices, yogurt, granola. It all adds up super fast. And what about your fresh pressed juice? So it sounds healthy, but often what happens is that the fiber gets stripped away while the natural sugars get concentrated. And the end result is that your juice leaves you less than satisfied, but you've got a nice spike in your blood sugar with a crash to follow. So even if your smoothie or fruit juice seems like it should be healthy, don't discount its overall impact. And the point here is to remember that liquid calories all contribute to your bottom line. And if you're not making progress, I would consider the place of those drinks in your diet. Okay? All right, next, let's talk about meals out. So I know I've mentioned eating out many times before, but let's zone in on this for just a minute. It is fun to eat at restaurants. The food is often more rich and more indulgent than what you would eat at home. But here's what we know. Even when you think you're making good choices, remember that restaurant portions are often much larger than what you make at home. And there is more oil, butter, sauce, sugar. There's just more when you eat out at a restaurant. And here's the truth. Sometimes it just doesn't take much. Depending on what kind of meal it is and how much you eat, it may only take one blowout meal at your favorite Mexican restaurant to keep you stuck. Even if you think you're making healthy choices when you're eating out, remember, you often don't see the hidden calories that show up from those added oils, sauces, butter, and sugar. And some of the salad dressings alone can be over the top and have more caloric density than you realize. And I'm not sharing all of this to tell you to avoid eating out. That is not the solution. But instead, remember that your approach to eating out will need to change. All bets are not off just because you're at a restaurant. And if you're eating out multiple times a week and you're confused as to why you're not losing weight, I would encourage you to pay attention to this. I would encourage you to look at what exactly you're eating and how much and make some decisions for yourself. And the goal is to find a way of treating yourself without it landing you right at maintenance. Now, I know I said at the beginning that we need to look beyond your main meals if you're eating healthy and not losing weight. But I'm going to backpedal here for just a second because I want to point out that portion size also matters. And while this is true for your snacks, it's also true for your main meals. So if you consider yourself a healthy eater, that is awesome. But we have to remember that healthy food still has calories. And sometimes it's easy to forget that just because a food is good for you, it doesn't mean you can eat unlimited quantities of it without impact. And most often, it's the healthy fats that are easy to overdo because, in my opinion, they taste the best. So that would be things like nuts, nut butters like peanut butter, avocado, hummus, olive oil. And of course, it is still absolutely possible to overdo it on carbs like quinoa and brown rice too. And these are all nutrient-dense foods that are considered healthy, but they're also calorie-dense. And it's easy to sabotage your efforts by serving yourself a larger portion of a healthy food than you realize. And again, this is not about restricting yourself. It's not about fearing fats or fearing carbs or fearing any macro group really, but instead about being aware. If you feel like you're doing everything right and you're still not seeing results, it's worth taking a look at your portion sizes, even for foods that you consider clean or healthy. And the goal is to find balance, where you're fueling your body with nutrient-dense foods, but doing it with reasonable portions that support your goals. Okay, so now that we've talked through some of the food-specific issues that might be keeping you stuck, let's talk about some of the other factors to consider if you're eating healthy, but you're not losing weight. So let's talk about eating out of true hunger versus eating out of habit. This is a big one, and it can most definitely contribute to you stalling in your progress. So remember a few weeks ago, I gave you one very simple, very basic question to consider to get a handle on your eating patterns. And that was to ask the question, why am I eating this? And your answer is going to fall into one of three categories. You eat because you're hungry, you eat because you're feeling a positive emotion, like joy when you're celebrating something, or you eat because of a negative emotion, including out of habit. So if you're eating out of habit, we have got to pull that apart. So here are some things to consider. Are you eating because you're bored or stressed? Or are you eating because the food is in front of you and that's what you do when you're in front of food, regardless of whether or not you're hungry? Or maybe you eat because it's part of your routine. It's lunchtime, so you eat, whether you're hungry or not. And here's what I want to point out. It may be that you only have a certain window of time to eat because of your schedule. So that may be all you've got. And if that's the case for you, I would simply encourage you to check in with yourself and ask how hungry you really are before you default to eating everything you've got in front of you. I've got clients who have very tight schedules. And when you take this approach to eating, you're taking hunger out of the picture. And that's often when you end up overeating because your mind goes to a place of now or never, and you don't check in with yourself and you eat everything that you brought with you for lunch, regardless of whether or not you're really hungry for it. Or maybe you're an emotional eater and eating is your response to stress, anxiety, or even procrastination. Emotional eating, super common driver of unwanted food take, and it requires serious awareness in order to address it. So stress eating often leads you to crave high fat, high sugar comfort foods. So you're not usually reaching for broccoli when you're stressed, right? And anxiety can have a similar effect. You're eating as a way to distract or numb yourself from the discomfort of anxiety. Or maybe you're a procrastination eater, and all that means is that you use food as a convenient excuse to delay an undesirable task like responding to an email or starting a big project. And I know we've talked about emotional eating a number of times on the show in the past, and I simply want to reiterate how important it is to recognize your patterns. And to do that, you have to be on the lookout for them because emotional eating often happens automatically without much awareness. You're not really thinking about it. But noticing what triggers you to eat and practicing awareness around those triggers, like emotions or habits or time of day, that is the first step in undoing it. Paying attention to why you're eating is just as important as what you're eating. And so when you slow down and ask the question to look for what is driving your urge to eat, that's when you start getting answers. That's when you learn why you're eating, whether that's stress, boredom, procrastination, a certain time of day, or true physical hunger. And answering for why you're eating will give you the information you need to make more intentional, more mindful choices. You might notice that around 4 o'clock every day, you feel the need to snack on something. But if you really get in there and ask yourself, why am I eating? You might find that you're bored, or you're tired, or you're dragging from a long day of work. It may not be true physical hunger. And then you can decide what to do with it. Does it mean that you need to practice managing emotions like boredom, procrastination, mental fatigue? Or are you truly hungry and need to eat? And ideally, you get really good at asking yourself that question whenever you're eating something you didn't plan. Identifying your patterns will help you build more mindful eating habits and prevent overeating and stalling your progress. So another reason you might be eating healthy and not losing weight is if you are in fact eating healthy, but you're only doing it on the weekdays. And I make a big stink about this because it comes up so often. If you are on track Monday through Thursday, only to let it go Friday through Sunday, you will most definitely be chasing your tail. So you may start your week strong, meal prepping, eating protein and veggies, and minimal snacking or grazing. But then by Friday, things start to slide. Maybe it's a drink with dinner on Friday because it's been a week, or extra snacks on Saturday when you're home and a little bored, and one or more dinners out at restaurants over the weekend. And then by Sunday, you may feel a little off track, but instead of getting back to your plan, you tell yourself, I'll get it together on Monday. And this is a pattern I see all the time. And the problem is you could be eating super healthy for a good portion of your week, but your weekends could be completely erasing that progress and keeping you right at maintenance. And again, it's not necessarily about overeating to the extreme. For most people, it's the combination of all the little extra indulgences that add up. You might be overeating just enough per day without even realizing it, but it's enough to wipe out the deficit that you created in the first part of your week. And then let's not forget about mindset here, because your weekend mentality is not just about the food. It's also about how you approach the shift in your routine. Most people have a predictable set schedule during the week. You might be busy with work, family, kids, school, and the routine, and that naturally helps you stick with a plan. But when the weekend comes, there's more free time, less structure, more social events, and often that comes with less intentionality around your food choices. And if this sounds like you, please know that this does not mean you can't enjoy your weekend. I'm not suggesting that you restrict yourself and eliminate all the fun, but it does mean that you need to be aware of your patterns and what's getting in your way. So maybe that means you pick 1 or 2 meals where you indulge in some way, but then you stick to your plan the rest of the weekend. Maybe you build in time for exercise over the weekend instead of letting your routine completely disappear. Whatever it is, goal is to find balance, not perfection, so that your weekends support your progress instead of keeping you running in circles. And so now let's also talk about the impact of sleep and stress, because those may be other factors that are keeping you stuck. So lack of sleep will increase your hunger and it will increase your cravings. And stress will do the same. When you don't get enough sleep, your body produces more ghrelin. That's the hormone that tells you you're hungry. At the same time, you're producing less leptin, the hormone that tells you you're full. So this shift will make you feel more hungry, even if your body doesn't actually need more food. And then meanwhile, being sleep deprived impairs your decision making, which can make it harder for you to manage yourself around highly palatable, highly processed, calorically dense foods. So it will be no surprise that after a night of terrible sleep, you might find yourself craving sugar, carbs, and salty snacks because your body is looking for a quick energy fix and it will take it in the form of food. And stress is just as powerful. When you're chronically stressed, your body releases more cortisol, which can ultimately increase your appetite and lead to emotional eating. So stress makes it harder for you to be mindful of your food choices. So instead of reaching for veggies and protein, you might be more likely to grab snack foods. And I've said it before, when you're stressed, you're not usually reaching for broccoli, right? No, it's chips, it's cookies, it's ice cream. And to make matters worse, stress can interfere with your sleep, creating a nasty cycle. You have poor sleep, and that leads to increased hunger and cravings. And then you add stress on top of that, and it makes it even harder to make good choices. So, if you're struggling to lose weight, even though you're eating well, take a good look at what your sleep habits and stress levels are like. Addressing sleep and stress could be just as impactful as addressing the food you put on your plate. Because when you prioritize quality sleep and stress management, you may find that it's easier to stay consistent with your plan. All right, so now that we've talked through some of the most common reasons that you might not be losing weight despite eating healthy meals, let's talk about some key strategies to get a handle on this. So, first would be food journaling. And I know some of you may be rolling your eyes at this, but honestly, I will keep talking about it because when you journal and you do it honestly, and commit to it, and commit to writing down everything you eat, I promise it will surprise you. So consider journaling and write down everything you eat and drink, not for forever, but even just a few days, which can be helpful because it will give you data. And this exercise is not about being overly strict or obsessive. It's really about gathering accurate information and increasing your awareness. I cannot tell you how many times I've had a client tell me she knows exactly what she's eating, but then she writes everything down for a few days, including the weekend, and she'll see it. She'll find a pattern she didn't pick up before, or she'll see just how much snacking she's doing. So I really do believe that journaling can help you. Maybe you're eating more frequently than you realized. Maybe you're snacking mindlessly during a stressful workday. Maybe the healthy foods that you're eating are being eaten in proportions that are larger than you thought. So the goal here by journaling is not to judge yourself. Instead, the goal is to become more mindful. When you see your actual food intake spelled out in front of you, it gets easier to identify the small changes that you can make that will have a big impact. And it may be something subtle, like reducing your portion size, reducing mindless snacking, or adjusting your meal timing. Any or all of these shifts can help you start seeing progress. All right, next, another strategy to consider if you're eating healthy but not losing weight is to look at your portion sizes, especially for foods that are more calorically dense. So foods like nuts, nut butters, oils, and other higher calorie foods that are healthy, like some full-fat dairy items. And I say this because it's really easy to underestimate how much food you're actually consuming, especially with calorie-dense foods that don't take up much space on your plate. And I'll suggest this here. If you have never measured out what a serving size of your favorite higher calorie foods are, so for me, that's things like peanut butter or avocado, I encourage you to try it. So actually, what I have done, which was really eye-opening for me, was to take what I typically would when I take a serving of peanut butter. So I just grabbed my spoon and I scooped out what I typically would have. And what I found was that my serving was more like 3 tablespoons of peanut butter instead of 2. So I am a generous scooper and I have to pay attention because I could easily make my serving 4 tablespoons or bigger if I'm not careful. So it might be helpful to have an idea of what one serving of some of your favorite foods actually looks like and let that guide you. I think you might be surprised at how small some of these serving sizes actually are. And it's almost always for the fats, things like nuts and nut butters and cheeses and other dairy. It really does not take much to nearly double or even triple your portion size. And if you're not paying attention, it can be really easy to overdo it. And the other thing I want to point out here is this. Being intentional does not mean obsessing over every gram of food that you eat. This is not the idea we're going for. Instead, it just means being more mindful of how much you're actually putting on your plate and making adjustments where necessary to get you closer to your goals. And again, this goes back to raising awareness about what you're actually doing instead of guessing. Another strategy to consider is to decide on boundaries around eating out. If you eat out often, I would encourage you to think really carefully about how you'll navigate meals out and your goals simultaneously. I've talked about restaurant food and the potential pitfalls, and you get to decide what it's worth to you. You get to decide what level of indulgence works. And again, this is not to say stop going out. That's not it at all. But it will likely mean a different approach than what you've always done. So it may be that you start ordering more salads and you get dressing on the side, or you start skipping the bread basket, or you start going for grilled dishes instead of fried stuff. So consider what you'll do ahead of time. Look at the menu. Know what you're going to order before you walk in, if you can. Consider portion size and consider taking a portion of it home or sharing an entree instead of eating the whole thing yourself. And again, remember that being mindful does not mean that you can't eat out. It just means that you have a plan and stay engaged instead of thinking all bets are off. It means experimenting with different approaches until you find a way to support your goals instead of derailing them. So next, another strategy to consider is making room for the indulgences in your life. So if you love chocolate or pizza or pastries, then I would argue that we've got to find a way to make room for those in your plan. Completely depriving yourself of the foods that you love most often backfires because it leads you to feeling restricted. And most of us can only hold out restricting for so long before rebounding and overindulging. So instead of taking an all or nothing approach, I would encourage you to find a way to eat the foods that you enjoy so that it fits into your life. And the key here is to be purposeful. If you love dessert, think about it and plan for when you'll treat yourself. Maybe you plan for treats a few times in the week and then you have them instead of trying to avoid sweets entirely only to binge when you feel overly deprived. Or if you like alcohol, consider how you'll balance that with the rest of your meal. And the idea is that by choosing when and how you indulge ahead of time, you prevent an impulsive choice that comes from feeling deprived and restricted. And then when you do treat yourself, enjoy it. Enjoy your indulgence instead of racing through it. Eating a piece of cake mindfully and truly enjoying it is very different from mindlessly snacking on cookies out of habit. So give yourself permission to enjoy the foods that you love and do it without guilt because it will help you stay more consistent in the long run. And that is just it. We have talked about loads of reasons that you might not be losing weight, even if you're eating healthy. And in order to address whatever the underlying issue is that's keeping you from moving forward, it's going to require consistency. No matter what the issue is, it's going to take consistency in order to fix it. So I mentioned it earlier, but let me make it explicit. You do not have to be perfect to lose weight. You do not have to be perfect, but you do have to be consistent. So if you're eating healthy but not losing weight, I would encourage you to do some sleuthing on yourself to find where things are not adding up and then zone in there. So maybe it's that you're on track during the week, but you go off the rails on the weekends. So you start creating a plan for yourself about how you're going to eat over the weekend. And then the next step is to practice following it. And it might be hard at first. It may be that you find yourself snacking quite a bit over the weekends, despite you writing a plan out for yourself. But that does not mean you give up and throw in the towel just because you had a weekend of snacking more than you planned. You keep going. And then the next weekend comes and you try again. You plan your meals and you work on not overdoing it on snacks. Or maybe it's that meals out are a challenge for you. So you decide you're going to stick to lean protein and veggies for your meal out and indulge on dessert. But then the bread basket comes and you go to town and have half the bread basket on top of your meal and top it off with a chocolate cake. Okay, so if that happens, you don't give up and swear nothing works. You try again the next time you go out to dinner. And the point is to remember that one off-track meal or even one day where things don't go as planned does not undo all of your efforts. What makes a difference is getting back on track as soon as possible instead of letting one slip up turn into a downward spiral. What makes a difference is that you recover as soon as possible instead of throwing your hands in the air and giving up. So it's not about never messing up. It's about getting back on track and moving forward even when you do mess up. So if you take nothing else from this episode, let this serve as a reminder that progress is built on persistence, not perfection. So every time you keep trying, you reinforce your own self-belief. And that matters way more than whatever you put in your mouth last night, okay? Keep moving forward. Keep asking yourself questions and testing out answers. Keep trying. Keep adjusting. And trust that your efforts will add up to success. All right? And if you want help with this, let's go. When you coach with me, we'll make a deep dive into your habits and find out what's keeping you stuck. Then we'll address it head on. Check out my website, send me a message at www.carriehollandmd.com/contact. And let's talk about how changing your habits will change your life. All right? Thank you again for hanging out with me, and I'll catch you again next week. Hey, if you want to build muscle but don't know where to start, I've got you covered. Head over to carriehollandmd.com/buildstrength and download my free guide to help you maximize your strength training. Inside, you'll find the essential exercises for building muscle, plus simple 1, 2, and 3-day workout plans that you can follow with just dumbbells and a bench. You'll also find strength training tips to help you train smarter and see real results. My goal is to help you get strong, and this strength training guide will help you do it. Go to carriehollandmd.com/buildstrength and check it out. Thank you for listening to the Strong is a Mindset podcast. If you want to learn more about how to build both a strong mind and a strong body by eating, moving, and most importantly, thinking, check out carriehollandmd.com.